to this. Did you all hear that? Um,
I just had a pop up saying my it being recorded. I was like, yes, it's fine. You're not confused.
oh, it is recorded. Now I have to how to share the slides. Here we go. Okay. Hopefully, hopefully this is hopefully people can see that the slides as well. Um, here we go. Show full meeting. There we go. Okay, I think this is working now. We will Sophie's love hearted me, so I think we're on to a winner here. So we will make a start. I think I was gonna say is Rihanna here because I know she was coming. She's here now. I think this might be everybody. So I'm gonna make a start. Feel free to use the chat function as well. You don't have to come on the microphone. You can just sit and listen if you want as well. It can be as interactive or not as interactive as you like. So what we're gonna go through today, oops, is getting to know your body. So we're gonna talk through scale weights. We're gonna talk through the different phases and how to kind of like build confidence and balance with that. Because I know this is probably the most popular topic, I think, for us all. We've all done the scale mindset. We've all, been in that trap. So that's what I'm going to talk about first. So we're going to cover scale weight, what that looks like. I'm also going to share a little bit about my own scales, which I did briefly talk about in the chat. But just to show you that actually, even when you stay on track, even when you do everything right, the scales can still go up and down. Okay, so we're gonna start there. And then I'm going to talk through tracking progress beyond the scales. So how to get out of that mindset of, okay, my scales didn't go down this week, so I haven't made progress. Okay, so other ways that you can kind of see progress without that number necessarily coming down. Then we're going to talk through the different phases. So I talk a lot about like calorie deficit. I talk a lot about like maintenance phase, and you'll often hear me like use these terms in your check-in videos. So this is what I wanted to kind of go through today to make sure that people actually understand what the hell I'm talking about. Because we can hear these terms, and it's really important to understand them. When we're thinking about the change in weather now, that might mean change of goals. You know, and it's important to know about the different phases and kind of what that looks like and what that means for our training as well. Okay, so we're going to look at how to use a calorie deficit correctly, why the maintenance phase matters, using a calorie surplus to build strength. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of summarize it all, but also get you to think about answering some questions. You don't have to share the answers with the group. This is just something for you to think about, but also something that we could potentially talk talk about one-on-one as well. So if we have our next kind of one-to-one session or one-to-one phone call, just something for us to kind of consider together. So a chance for you to kind of reflect on where you're at now and kind of where you want to be in some of the ways in which we can get there. So we're going to start with, oops, getting click happy. The truth about scale weight. So I did share this in the group the other day, and this is my scales from the last year. Okay, so from October last year to October now. You can see you could literally like go skiing on these. It's very, very up and down. And yes, my physique has changed during this time. I've gained weight and I've lost weight, but there's different phases to that. But also, I would like to think I am on track probably 90% of the year. And my scales still look like this. So this is not, this is to kind of show you that actually scales do go up and down, and having a number in your head can actually be quite damaging. So often when I do consultations with people and something that I've done myself, people always have like a number in their head. Or I'd like to be, I don't know, 10 stone 5 or this. They often have a number in their head. And as time goes on, this changes quite a lot because actually people realize that I look better. My scales haven't moved much, but I look better. My physique looks better. So it's really important to understand that actually the scales is not the sole purpose of kind of tracking your progress. And scale weight isn't just your body fat, okay? It's a reflection of quite a few um different things. So water retention. So scale weight can vary depend on how much water you've had the day before or or if you've even had water before you've weighed. Okay, so it's really important when you are weighing to do it fasted, do it first thing in the morning. That's going to be the truest reflection of your scale weight. Food volume and digestion. So there'll be certain foods that we digest better than others. So for me, I just cannot digest sweet corn, which really upsets me because I actually love corn on the cob. So if I would add sweet corn, my scales would be would rocket. Things like red meat can be a little bit harder to digest. And especially if you've kind of been out of routine, so if you've just come back from a holiday or a weekend away, often the scales will have rocketed. And that's because we've had different food, different water. Okay, so that's a big part of it. Muscle mass has a big factor to play. So I'll go into a bit more detail about this in a couple of slides' time. But actually, when we're building muscle, annoyingly, muscle weighs more than fat. Okay, so scales will go up. We'll look better, our body composition will look better, but we might weigh more originally than what we started, which, can be really, really confusing for people. Is that, I've put in all this effort and my scales are higher than they were at the start. Okay, so it's really important not to kind of focus solely on those scales. Stress, sleep, and hydration levels. So usually if you've had lack of sleep, the scales will go up. Stress as well. So when we get stressed, obviously our cortisol levels will rise, and that can also make scales shoot up as well. So some things to think about when you are waiting in for your check-in. If it has gone up, have a little think about what could have caused it other than actually, yes, I ate a cookie. But that is not going to make me gain 3 pounds on the scales. Okay, so really, really important just to consider that scale weight isn't just your body fat. There's so many more factors to take into consideration. So I'll talk a little bit about body composition as well. So body composition is kind of how we look. It's how our body's made up. So actually, when I actually weigh more on the right photo, than the left. So I think about, I think I was about 48 kilos on the left, and I was weighing about 49, closer to 50 here. And arguably, some people would say that I look better, on the right photo where I'm actually weighing more. I look leaner. I'd gained a lot of muscle. That's okay, Jade. I think when you usually join it, it doesn't put you on mute straight away, so don't worry at all about that. So that just kind of, yeah, I wanted to kind of share that with you because, we often think that the progress is only when the scales go down. Okay, so thinking about your body composition, where I'd actually grown quite a lot of muscle tissue, so I am weighing heavier on the scales. Okay. Other ways to track progress well, think about your strength and performance. So sometimes that can cause, when we are weighing a bit heavier, we've built a bit of muscle, is because we've actually increased in strength and performance. Energy and mood as well. So often when we have large stints in a calorie deficit, our energy can drop quite low. So that's something to consider as well, is that how am I feeling in terms of energy and mood? A couple of years ago, I went down to my lowest scale weight. And I would say my energy and my mood was the worst it's ever been. Okay, so it's something to consider as well. We think that when we reach that number on the scales, that we'll feel a certain way. And for me, it was quite different. Okay. Habits and consistency. So things that maybe you do now that you wouldn't have done, prior to kind of starting. One thing I noticed about um all of you really is you all increase your steps. Everybody increases their steps as soon as they get into this. Start new hobbies. Lots of you have got into kind of like running and other things outside of the gym as well. And also kind of your confidence and trust in yourself as well. People build that kind of confidence to go places on their own, even just stepping on the gym floor. Okay, sometimes when people start, it's that's a huge thing. So progress is not always aesthetics. Yes, that is a big part of why we do it because we want to look good, we want to feel good. But there's other ways of tracking progress. So that's another kind of couple of things I wanted to consider that when you are doing your check-ins, how are you actually feeling, in yourself about that week? Okay, so now we're going to go through the different phases. So we've got calorie deficit, which most of you will be familiar with. So this is where we consume fewer calories than our body burns naturally, okay? So this is the foundation of fat loss. So if you're in a weight loss phase, initially you will be in that calorie deficit. Okay. So we're increasing movement. We're, thinking about kind of cutting our food down a little bit. So we're creating that deficit in terms of that calorie output. Okay. So use it correctly is what separates a short-term fix from sustainable results. Okay. So often when um I'm gonna mention the word Slimming World. That is often that short-term fix. And although it works for some people, it's not always that sustainable. Okay, because it's not changing really kind of lifestyle. It's just kind of it might be one week, cutting out all carbs or cutting out all fats. It's not really building that kind of consistency with calories. So how to do a calorie deficit, in a sustainable way, and correctly is to actually start from a place of maintenance. Okay, so when you're, initially starting, it's really important not to go into a huge deficit first. So not slashing the calories straight away. Um, you know, myself or whoever you work with, it needs to be that small, steady deficit first. Okay. If we're going from if your kind of body's normal calorie burn is kind of 2000, if you're cutting that down straight down to 1400, your body's almost going to go into shock. Okay. Energy levels are going to plummet. And your body's going to cling on to any bit of food that you're consuming. Okay. So really important not to like slash it straight away. And the goal is to be able to maintain this over a period of time. Okay. So if you're making it really extreme, um, it's we're less likely to stick to it. And actually, lots of clients that I've worked with over the years, when I put their calories on the app, some clients have actually said to me like, "Oh my gosh, I can't consume that amount of calories," or "I'm not used to," it's quite a shock. I think, there's been lots of different fad diets and maybe other dieting platforms that we've used that have said that you should eat 12,000 calories a day. Okay, that's more of like a child's diet. So sometimes when we see those figures, it's a little bit of like a that's a lot of food and a lot of calories. But we're making sure that we eat the right things. If we're eating the right things, actually that's what our body needs, rather than just kind of cutting it all out and almost making it impossible to stick to. Another part of a calorie deficit that's really important is to prioritize your protein, which, for the gym, we all know that's really important. So when our body's in a deficit, actually our body also breaks down quite a lot of muscle. Um, and lots of the time that's not what we want. We want to create that kind of lean but strong look. So it's really important to prioritize, high protein meals and structured training so that we're protecting that muscle tissue, and help our body look and feel a lot stronger. So, sometimes when people go on that initial weight loss, we say things like, "Oh, we've lost, I've lost my boobs or I've lost my bum." Yeah, but if we've done a calorie deficit in sort of that correct way, we're less likely to kind of strip the weight off in places that we want to keep it. Okay, so really important with a calorie deficit that we do it correctly. We do it gradually, so it's not something that we should, be dropping calories 500 calories every week. Okay, you want to come that steady kind of decrease. And then another point with a calorie deficit is we shouldn't be in a deficit continuously for like a year. Okay, you can do it over a period of time, but often on check-ins I'll talk about a maintenance phase, even if it is for a couple of weeks. Okay, and this is where we consume the same amount of calories that our body burns. Okay, so we're kind of breaking even. um we're we're maintaining that progress. And this part of the process often gets overlooked because lots of people's goals are either kind of weight loss and then it switches to that I want to build muscle. Okay. But what's really important in between is that maintenance phase, where it isn't, I've put it on there, it's not a pause button. It's a balance button between progress, and sustainability. So this is the phase really that keeps the progress steady and keeps it sustainable. Okay, so this will be where maybe we increase our calories a little bit from a calorie deficit, and we'll just maintain for a couple of weeks. And then sometimes we go back into the deficit. So it's giving our bodies a bit of a break, a bit of a rest, that we need when we're, training hard, and, focusing on nutrition. Oops. So, what is the purpose of a maintenance phase? It allows our bodies to adapt to its new setting point. So if you have been in a calorie deficit for a couple of months, you know, ideally, we should have lost weight. So it's important to go back to that maintenance phase so that our body can kind of like adjust and say, right, we're 5 kg, you know, lighter than we were a couple of months ago. So making sure we can keep it consistent. Okay. This is where it helps our bodies hold on to the results. Okay, so this is what makes it sustainable, and we're avoiding that yo-yo cycle. Okay, where actually, we lose weight for a couple of weeks and then we go down and then up and then down. It kind of balances it out, evens it out. I like to think of it like smoothing icing over a cake. Okay, it's like protecting, and then we can add another layer. Okay, that kind of thing. So it makes the future fat loss phases more effective. So sometimes you'll do a maintenance and then go back into a calorie deficit as well. So often I'll use this if a client is sort of like, you might have heard me say like plateauing. So if there's nothing we can do in terms of kind of, add some additional training, and maintenance phases is the best sort of approach to take. So that's why I've added the question on the check-in form about hunger levels as well. If we're continuously getting hungry, energy is low, training's not feeling good. Sometimes we just need a little bit of a reset. So a maintenance phase will come into play here. So we're not going to undo any of the progress we've just made. We're going to kind of sustain it and make it more effective when we go back into that deficit. And then we've got the calorie surplus. Okay, so this means eating slightly more than your body burns. Okay, this is not a gaining weight, but fueling your progress. Okay. When I used to think about a calorie surplus, so it's often referred to as a bulk. Lots of what I used to see online was kind of just people eating large amounts of food. It's usually males, to be fair, who talk about like a bulk. Oh yeah, I'm gonna eat this. I'm gonna eat 5 burgers instead of two, that kind of thing. And actually, that's not what a calorie surplus is at all. It's not eating. It's not going from a deficit of a real well-structured nutrition plan and then just kind of eating whatever the hell you want. It's increasing calories but eating with intention, so eating the right things. Okay, focusing on, if I give you an example, if you're going into a calorie surplus, instead of having 200 grams of sweet potato, you might have 250 grams. Okay, so you're increasing the volume, but you're keeping what you eat and the quality of the food that you eat the same. Okay, so it's not that you get extra wiggle room to eat more chocolate. Ideally, you do have a little bit more flexibility, I guess. But ideally, what we want is, to be eating higher volumes of good food. I've just realized I haven't opened the chat. So has anybody got any questions about sort of the first couple of slides? We haven't got many slides to go really. But anything that's like kind of jumping out at you or any questions that you've got, pop them in the chat and I'm more than happy to kind of answer them in live time as well. So how to use a calorie surplus to build muscle. It's actually, I would say building muscle is actually harder, in my opinion, than the weight loss phase. Because of the way that you have to train, and sometimes actually eating more is hard, it's difficult. I went into a calorie surplus last winter and I felt so full all the time. And when I feel so like really full, I find it hard to train. I find it hard to feel really good about my training. So it can be quite difficult, but it's important to do if you really want to build, quite a lot of muscle tissue. So same with kind of the calorie deficit. We don't want to jump up really, really quickly with calories. It should be a gentle surplus of around 200 to 300 calories above your maintenance. Okay, so where your body kind of naturally sits in terms of calorie output. So enough to support muscle growth whilst keeping body fat minimal, okay? And that will be achieved through still focusing on your whole foods, that 80/20 that I always talk about. So, it's only an extra really 200 to 300 calories. People think it's about going, up 1,000 calories. And again, it's that steady increase. So sometimes when I change people's nutrition, it'll only kind of be a couple of grams here on protein and a couple of grams increased on carbs. Okay, it's not necessarily like another meal in the mix. Okay, so it's important to kind of realize that a small surplus is where we get the big results. Alongside the nutrition side of it, with a calorie surplus, we're also going to be training a little bit differently. So often when we're in kind of like a calorie deficit, we might do kind of higher ranges of reps. So anything from kind of, 8 reps to up until kind of like 15, sometimes 20. Whereas when we're in the calorie surplus and we're looking to build muscle, on some exercises, we might actually be training more in the strength zone. So it might be kind of more 6 to 8 reps, or sometimes even down to like 4 to 6. Okay, so we train a little bit differently, because obviously depending on, when you are lifting heavy, that's where we're going to build the most muscle. Also improving on your form, so making sure your form is important as well. And tracking strength and progress each week. So as we do on the app, we're tracking our sessions, pushing for PBs. So in a calorie surplus, you probably do have more energy to, push forward with upping the weights, because more food generally means probably, more energy, and being able to kind of push that a little bit more. And then the last one, as I said, expect to feel really full. Um, Sometimes uncomfortably full. I hate to say it, but I always feel when I'm in that kind of calorie surplus, I train when I get into it, I train really well, but I often feel quite sluggish. And that is normal. So expect to feel a little bit a little bit uncomfortable. Um, and things like when you're taking your progress pictures, you're probably not going to see as much definition on the abdominal area, okay, which can feel a little bit frustrating when you've come out of like a weight loss phase and you're starting to see, you're starting to see like people say, oh, I'm starting to see some abs or I'm starting to see some definition in my upper body. And then more food means looking a little bit fuller. So it's not a case of kind of putting on body fat, but just kind of looking at your physique, you just do look fuller. Okay. And that's kind of the point of it is that you know, we're gaining muscle, which, sometimes we can look bigger. Da, da, da. Yeah, Lucy, you're definitely not on your own here. This is something I struggled to do probably up until I'm gonna say like last year was the only the time where I did a calorie surplus where I actually thought, no, this is the right thing to do. And when you come initially from when your goal is initially fat loss, and then suddenly we're kind of eating, the same calories as we were, before we started that, it can feel a little bit it could just feel a little bit wrong. Like I'm gonna undo everything that I've just done. And that is my role really to make sure that you understand why we've upped your carbs or why we need more protein. So if you ever have questions about, why have you increased my protein or, like Lucy said, knowing how and what to add to meals ask that question. So, particularly for people who do a lot of running, um, I do increase carbs. Definitely leading up to if you've got like a running event, I always say to people, right, this is the time to carb up. So it is adding portion size. So if you are having, if you've got like a pasta dish, you just have more pasta. Okay. It's not a case of like, okay, I'm gonna add, a big loaf of bread with this. You might add a slice of bread, but it's not about adding like, adding too much to it and overcomplicating it. And I would say that's the key really is not to overcomplicate it. We're increasing the volume, but we're not changing the diet. Okay. So in a nutshell, we're eating the same foods, but we're just having a bigger portion. Okay, so that's kind of the key to it really. And as I always say to people, like if you're not sure, ask questions, or if you're concerned that actually, I'm not seeing the results that I want to, like that's why I always say like really important to keep in contact with me, or book in a progress call. Ask me the questions, what's my rationale behind that? I always say to people like ask me, question me. I don't, I don't mind people asking questions because yeah, I want you to learn about why we do this and why kind of I've changed your program and things like that. So wrapping it up now, really, I've done this. I'm surprised at myself. I can talk a lot, but I've managed to do this in just over half an hour, which is I think it's a world record for me. So bringing it all together, why are we talking about this? And what can you take? You've got the knowledge now. We've kind of talked through that, but what are you going to do with the knowledge next? Okay. So really important to remember that goals will evolve. Okay, so the goal of maybe weight loss at the start might not necessarily be your goal now. You might have dropped some body fat, you're feeling at a stage where, yeah, I'm feeling comfortable. I don't want to get any smaller than this, but what's next? So it might be a muscle building phase or it might be a maintenance phase. Okay, so your approach to that also has to change. Which, as Lucy said in the chat there, like that's scary. And that can be really hard to be like, okay, I've just done a deficit for 6 months and now suddenly I'm eating more and I'm scared I'm going to undo all that progress. So again, talk to me about it. Talk amongst yourselves in the group as well. I think there's definitely opportunity to kind of, share in the group if you're comfortable with that, like how you're feeling. Um, Progress isn't just about fat loss, okay? And certainly not just about scale weight. Um, that's one thing I think we all initially have to accept is that the scales don't tell the true picture all the time. Is it nice to see them come down when you're putting in the work? Yes, it is. But it's not, thinking about the bigger picture. So how do my clothes fit? How am I feeling? How are my energy levels? How much energy have I got in my sessions? How confident am I feeling in my sessions as well? Because people often overlook all that and jump straight to the, oh my gosh, I've gained 2 pounds on the scales this week. So all that training that I did this week, all those PBs that I achieved, actually, they've just got forgotten about. Okay, so really try and it's really hard to do in that moment, whether it's a Friday morning or Sunday morning, you step on the scales, you've hit all your nutrition, you've ticked off all your sessions, and then you're like, okay, that's a kick in the teeth. So try and reframe it, try and remember, this conversation that we're having now, or, drop me a message, let's talk about it. Um, and then lastly, the more you understand your body, the more you can work with it, not against it. And yeah, I really like that statement. So there's so much. I think the a woman's body is very complex. As we know, I think, not being too stereotypical here, but with a man's body generally, if they stick to their meal plan and they tick their training, the scales show them what they want to see. Frustrating. Me and Josie were talking about this in her session earlier, is that like men generally can eat a bit more of what they want, than we can, which is frustrating. But it's about understanding that. Later, probably the next month, I'm gonna do one about more thinking about your like women's hormones. So, thinking about kind of time of the month, but also menopause, pre-menopause. That's really important. That has a massive impact. So that's probably going to be my next session because I think that's something that we can all relate to as like again, time of the month, or if you are feeling menopausal, that's something I want to really clue up on because it's huge and it's not talked about enough. Um, so understanding it, like, why does my body do this? Because then when we do step on the scales or we are taking the progress pictures and we're not seeing necessarily what we want, is thinking like, is this because I haven't stuck to the plan, or is this something an external factor in terms of, an internal factor, sorry. Is there something going on in terms of time of the month or hormones? Okay, so they're kind of the main things that I want you to take away. I am hopefully recording this session as well. Fingers crossed, that it has worked. Um, so refresh yourself if you need to. Message me as well. Let's have more open conversations. That is what I'm here for. And then I did say I'd ask you to think about answering these questions, to yourself. I'm not expecting anyone to share their answers unless you want to. But what phase are you in right now, and how are you currently feeling about your progress? Okay, so whether you're in the weight loss phase and you feel like actually, yeah, I'm at a point where I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling comfortable. So what next? What do I want to do next? Do I want to do sort of more performance training? Is this, do I want to get into running, or do I want to start lifting a little bit heavier? Or, on the flip side of that, am I at a good stage now where I've built a little bit of muscle and actually I want to kind of strip it back a little bit. I want to see what's, hiding under there. So where are you in your process at the moment? How are you feeling about your progress? And then the next question is, what do you need to do next? Okay, and how can I, as your coach, support that? Um, are you, feeling a little bit too hungry sometimes? Do you need more structure with nutrition or training? And do you need more support? Because there'll be times of the year, and I particularly notice this in myself this time of year, where I need to be stricter with myself about my routine. Um, I am this does shock people, but I am a bit of an all or nothing person. And if I'm not on it, I'm completely off it. So this time of year, I always get tempted to miss the gym. Um, I was training in the mornings and, finding that hard. Now it's getting a little bit darker. Um, so, have a think about what you're currently doing now. And is that kind of getting you to where you want to be, or do you need a little bit more support this time of year? Use the group as well. I know I keep saying that, but there's so many different people with different goals in there, and I think there's room for kind of sharing your experiences, or I love it when people cook something and they post a photo of it, or just little ideas that you find that help you could help others. I did mention as well the other day about doing kind of like little subgroups. Um, so I set up the WhatsApp as a community. So you can do like subgroups. So I said about doing perhaps one for the runners in the group. Okay, you don't have to join that group then. But if you do run in and you want to share some tips, or perhaps we can all meet up for a little run. Um, so like tapping into that a bit more. I'll be probably doing a couple of those groups over the next couple of weeks. One of them I think I want to do is like a book club, not necessarily like reading like stories, but I read quite a lot of like the self-help books. I don't like to call them that. Like I would say like mindset books really. Um and I think lots of us kind of read those as well. So like little groups where we can, have a shared interest, but tap into that kind of like group accountability as well. So yeah, lots of new things coming up. I think we can all do it, especially this time of year. I think it is a good time of year to really get stuck in, because the evenings, yes, it's basically dark now outside. The evenings are drawing in, and it's quite easy to stay in, put your pajamas on. I know Jade will have her Christmas pajamas on already. But yeah, I think it's really important to use this time. Absolutely, I do. Use this time of year to, put all that time into yourself, because there's not much else to do, in the dark evenings. Um, so that's all I have in terms of content. I hope you find it useful, because I think this is something that we all, whether we've been training for 10 days or 10 years, we all get the moments where we step on the scales and it's like, right, I feel like crap. Or times where you want to throw in the towel. Like sometimes even as a coach, I get frustrated with my own training, and things don't always go to plan, as we know. Um, Things crop up in work. I know that's a big one, and definitely something I want to cover. But I definitely think that we can do more of kind of learning, and hopefully knowledge sharing. Um, and yeah, I think doing this once a month, I'm open to topics. I'm open to for people to say, I'd love you to talk about this. But I definitely think, the next one we'll talk a little bit about like hormones and time of the month and what impact that has. But yeah, I hope you learned something, took something away from it. Um, and yeah, I'm totally open to next topic for can't believe I'm saying this, November. But yeah, hopefully you find it useful. The theme of the week this week is understanding your body. So you guys are already one step ahead with that, because you've joined the seminar. So And as always, talk to me. That's what I'm here for. If you do feel like you need a little bit more support or knowledge in a certain area, um, that's what I'm here for, and tap into me. But yeah, I'll share a little bit more about this week's theme in about an hour or so in the chat. So look out for that. But I will let you go and enjoy your Sunday evening. And yeah, thank you all for joining. I'm gonna try and stop the recording.